This winter we have been growing Microbush tomatoes in our basement Kratky style. We are very happy with the result, and in this video we will show you how you can do the same. In November we sowed some Microbush seeds. The two varieties we sowed are called Bonsai and Mini Bell. The last time we grew tomatoes, the plants grew all the way to the roof, so this time we wanted something smaller. We found a web shop called tomatprat.no, which promised very small plants with a lot of tomatoes. We picked two of the smallest varieties and sowed 2 seeds of each in rockwool cubes. The first variety is called Bonsai. The second one is called Mini Bell. We have previously soaked the rockwool cubes in water. There is also a bit of water on the bottom of the propagator to keep the air humid. We put the seeds under light from the start, but the light is connected to a timer. During night the light will turn off and it will be completely dark. During day the heat radiation from the light will make the inside of the propagator warm and humid. This way we also ensure that the sprouts get light as soon as they germinate, and we avoid leggy seedlings. We also have a small heater to ensure that the temperature does not get too low during night. Here is a small time lapse of the seedlings growing. The tomato seedlings are at the far end. In this next part of the video we will show you how to make cheap nutrient stock solution from powder. If you are not interested in this, feel free to skip to the next chapter using the timestamps in the description below. We will use crystalline and calcinite powder from Yara to make an A and B stock solution. These nutrients are used by professional greenhouses and are usually sold in 25 kilograms bags. But it is possible to obtain smaller quantities from web shops like innehagen.no. We store the powder in plastic containers after opening the bag to keep them dry. We also store them away from sunlight. Mixing the nutrients is actually very easy. We use 100 grams of powder and 1 liter of water in each bottle. Notice that we used different spoons and funnels for each nutrient. Mixing these nutrients together directly will cause them to crystallize. That is why this is a two-part A and B nutrient. First, we put 100 grams of crystalline indigo powder in the first bottle. Then we do the same with the calcinite. As the name suggests, the calcinite contains nitrogen and calcium, while the crystalline indigo contains all the rest of the minerals, which is needed for a complete nutrient solution. Okay, that was easy. 100 grams of powder in each bottle. Now we add 1 liter of hot water to each bottle. Using hot water helps the powder dissolve more easily. We do the same for the other bottle. Finally, we screw on the cap and shake the bottles. You should shake the bottles for a whole minute to ensure everything is dissolved. That's it. 1 kilogram crystalline costs about $10. With 100 grams in each bottle, one bottle will cost about $1, which is a tenth of the price of buying finished liquid nutrients. We will now use the stock solution we just made to mix 10 liters of ready-to-use nutrient solution. With seedlings, we usually use 4 ml per liter, or in this case 40 ml for 10 liters. For these seedlings, we use crystalline indigo, but later on in the growth we will use crystalline plus. Yarrow recommends crystalline plus for tomatoes, but the difference is really small. In our experience, both work fine, but we think indigo makes it easier since it lowers the pH more, so we don't need to use pH minus. No for the calc in it. Just like the crystalline, 4 ml per liter, 40 for this 10 liter bucket. Later on in the growth, when the plants start to bloom, we will use a little bit more crystalline than calc in it. But for now, we mix equal amounts of both. Next, we fill up the reservoirs and plant our seedlings. We use a homemade grow tent with a full spectrum micro area tree as a grow light. We have two 27-liter totes, and we will use the one to the left for our Microbush tomatoes. We fill the tote with the nutrient solution we just made. We fill it up so that the water level is just below the neck pots. Note that if the seedlings don't have roots sticking out below the rock wall, you will have to fill it up all the way to the bottom of the rock wall to give the seedling access to water. But as you can see in our case, that is not a problem. The seedlings have long, healthy roots, which we are careful to thread through the net pots. Make sure that the roots are long enough to touch the water. We do the same with the 3 other seedlings. We cover the holes not in use. In this case we use a piece of plastic, but you could also fill the empty pots with clay pebbles. We also cover the gap around the rockwool cubes. This will prevent light from shining down into the water, which can cause algae growth. It will also prevent humidity escaping from the airspace in the tank. When growing Kratky style, it's important to have a humid environment in the tank to encourage air roots to grow, which we will show you later. Next, we measure pH and EC. EC is a measurement of how much salt or nutrients is dissolved in the water. This is measured by testing the electrical conductivity or EC of the water. In our case, the EC meter reads about 980 microsiemens per centimeter, or about 1 millisiemens. This is perfect for seedlings. Next, we measure pH. As a rule of thumb, a good pH for hydroponics is between 5.5 to 6.5. pH is a bit high, but for seedlings this is okay. We will increase nutrient strength in about 1 week. This is 1 week later. We add 10 ml of calcium nitrate and 10 ml of crystalline indigo. Crystalline indigo contains a bit of ammonium nitrogen, which will decrease the pH without having to use pH minus. This is why we usually prefer crystalline indigo. The difference between crystalline indigo and plus is really small. Both will work fine. Since we don't use a pump, we remove the lid to mix the nutrients together. We measure again. EC is now about 1.1 millisiemens. pH is about 6.5. We now leave the plants to grow for a few days. The flashing you see on the time lapse is the humidifier turning on and off. During winter, the air in our house gets really dry. We set the humidifier to turn on if the humidity falls below 45%. This will give the plants a nice shower now and then. As the plants grow larger, they will produce their own humidity through plant transpiration. When this happens, there might be an opposite problem with too much humidity. At this point, it will be important with good ventilation in your grow tent. Many grow tent kits has functionality to turn on ventilation automatically when air humidity gets too high. But in our case, we will just open the tent and use a fan. This is only 14 days after we planted the seedlings. The plants are really thriving and are already putting out buds. Let's have a look at the roots. Wow, really healthy roots. There is also a lot of air roots. Air roots are the furry roots sticking out from the net pots above the water. This is a Kratky system and there is no oxygen in the water, so the air roots above the waterline is vital for the plant to survive. Here you can also see the humidifier turning on, since the air humidity in the tent drops when we open it. The air coming out of the humidifier is actually cold. The humidifier uses ultrasound and not heat to create the fog. We'll leave the plants to grow for another week. One week later and the plants are now blooming. Tomato flowers can actually be quite pretty. We check the water level, pH and EC. Roots are still very healthy looking. We take out a water sample to make it easier to measure. pH is a bit high. This might be because the plants ate much of the nutrients. Let's check how much nutrients is left. 0.6 millisiemens is much too low. The plants have eaten a lot of the nutrients when they started to flower. We need to add nutrients and adjust pH. First we add some water, but not too much. We don't want to drown the air roots you saw earlier. We add 30 milliliter calcium nitrate. We then add 40 milliliter crystalline plus. We use a bit more crystalline than calcinate in the pre-flower and flower phase. The nitrogen is primarily for foliage growth, which we don't want so much of at this point. We would rather have much flowers and fruit. Also note that we swapped from crystalline indigo to crystalline plus, which is slightly better for adult tomato plants. It has a bit more potassium, which is important for tomatoes when blooming and fruiting. Let's take a new sample. Much better, but not enough for flowering tomato plants. We add some more nutrients. We use 3 parts calcinate for 4 parts crystalline. But don't go too low on the calcium nitrate, since the plant still needs a lot of calcium. New sample. Still a bit low, but we will leave it there for now and check again in a few days. Since we used crystalline plus and not indigo, the pH has not gone down a lot. We will have to adjust it.
We use pH minus from Terra Aquatica to lower the pH. This is acid, so be careful when handling this. We start off with 1 ml to see how much this will affect the pH. We take yet another sample. 6.6, not much change. We add some more this time. Be careful so that no acid drips off the pipette. New sample. 6.4 is within range. We have now successfully adjusted the EC and pH and refilled some water. Back to the graft. The plants are really starting to fill up all the space. Maybe 4 plants was a bit too much. Also note that the humidifier turns on very seldom now, since the plants are producing humidity themselves. Meanwhile, outside in Norway. This is 1 month after we planted. These Microbush tomatoes has a really dense growth. We noticed that a lot of old branches are covering much of the new growth. We decided to cut some of these off to give more air and light for new flowers. We are not sure if this is really necessary, but we think this will give room for new shoots with flowers to reach the light. Also at this point, remember that good airflow is important. Let's have a quick look at what is going on in the neighboring tote. Here we planted some strawberries. Looks really yummy.
Ja. Där ja.
The plants are now getting more and more fruit and they are getting heavier and heavier. We are seriously starting to regret the decision of having 4 plants in this small tote. There are enormous amounts of flowers and more fruits forming. The plants now drink about 3 liters every day. Microbush tomatoes really shouldn't need any plant support. But if you pay close attention to the plant to the left, you can see that it is starting to fall over. Some of the branches actually broke off, and we had to support the plants with tomato clips and string. Lots of tomatoes wasted, but some of them might ripen if we put them in a windowsill. This is 1 week later and the tomatoes are finally starting to ripen. If you notice the noise, it is because we are using an air pump in the tote to the right. We cut a runner of the last strawberry plant and stuck it in a net pot above an air stone. And as you can see, the bursting bubbles have kept it moist and encouraged root growth. Since we can't remove the lid anymore, we have to use a stick to measure water level. Water level is a bit low, so we will have to refill. But first we want to check the pH and EC. To take a water sample without removing the lid, we now use a feeding syringe. Since the plant started fruiting, we have been trying to keep the EC at around 2. The EC is perfect, let's check the pH. Notice that the silicone cap is always kept on the pH meter. If not, the pH meter will dry out. Also remember to keep storage solution in the cap. The pH is perfect, 6.0. Let's refill some nutrient solution. We first add some pH minus. After having done this a couple of times, you will get a feel of how much is needed. Here we add about 0.5 milliliters for 2 liters of water. Calcium nitrate, here we fill about 15 milliliters for 2 liters. Crystalline Plus, about 20 milliliters for 2 liters. Since we cannot lift the lid anymore, we now use a funnel connected to a hose to refill water. Some days later, it's finally time to start eating the tomatoes. Let's cut off some of these. And put them on a piece of bread with some cheese and ham. They look really delicious. They actually taste really good as well, much more taste than store-bought tomatoes. We now harvest 5 to 10 tomatoes daily. This is 1 week later. They're a bit hard to find because of the dense foliage. This is 4 days later. This is after 1 month of continuous harvest. Even though we harvest continuously, more and more tomatoes ripen, so we decided to make tomato sauce for our pasta.
There we go.
Extremely short travel food, no pesticides, really tasty and a lot of fun. Now it's your turn.